until you take a step back and say, what am I really doing with my time on a day-to-day basis? You don't start to actually realize the amount that is just automatically happening.
Like, am I operating on my own program or am I operating on somebody else's program? Welcome back to the Unfulfilled Achiever podcast, where we talk about achieving success, but still feeling like something's missing. Hey, everybody, I'm Melanie Desir, along with my co host, Justin Wendell. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's crazy to think about us going from concept to episode 3 of the podcast. What do you think so far?
So far, loving it. I think at some point we're going to have to do some behind the scenes so everybody can see what our background looks like and how we actually come to pass to these things. 'Cause it's interesting, that mind meld. So we'll do some of that to help some people out at some point. But overall, loving it, loving the engagement. Looking forward to this episode and some future ones we have planned as well.
Yeah, I feel like we're learning a lot. Like with every episode, we're getting better. And we're making improvements, seen and unseen. Like one of the things I love is we've both made changes to our background. I love interior decorating. So after we did podcast number 1, I was like, you know what? I need to make some upgrades. So if you haven't paid attention, we're making changes along the way. So we hope y'all enjoy what we're doing. So, in our last episode, we talked about how do I know if I'm an unfulfilled achiever? What are the signs that go unnoticed? And then the impact of suppressing your passion and your purpose. So, in today's episode, we're moving forward and talking about finding your purpose and doing the work. You've heard us talk about that throughout the episodes, do the work, doing the work. And you know, you're probably like, what does that mean? Well, today we're really going to dive into that. So, today's episode is called Finding Your Purpose. And one of the key components to finding your purpose is self discovery. Self discovery is huge. Am I wrong here?
No, you're absolutely right. I think it's one of the most critical things. And quite honestly, it's one of the more challenging things that people don't put that initial effort into. But if you don't do that work, you don't truly learn what your purpose is, what you're meant to do, what your strengths and weaknesses are. So, absolutely, I think that work is critical. And I think this is something that's been asked about a few times from us is, let's get into this. So I think that'll be a good episode to kick that off on.
Yeah. So, thinking about self discovery, like, do you know yourself? Do you really know who you are? And the first thing we think about here is, are you programmed? And I know that probably sounds weird. What do you mean? Am I programmed? Well, who you are, what you believe, and how you operate. That's your programming. So, how much of your day happens without you even thinking about it? How does that land on you, Justin, and in your journey, your programming? How does that land?
I think the weird thing is often you're just completely unaware. And studies show, I think by age 35, typically 40% of your day is an auto program. If you think about it, you wake up, you use restroom, brush your teeth, eat breakfast, some of you go work out, go to work. Everything is on autopilot. You just don't necessarily think about it. And until you take a step back and say, what am I really doing with my time on a day-to-day basis? You don't start to actually realize the amount that is just automatically happening. And if you haven't done some of the work to make sure what is automatically happening is beneficial to where you're trying to go and your purpose, you can tend to lead towards maybe an area you don't want to be in, just doing more complacency and just living in the comfort zone and not reaching the levels you want to reach. So it resonates heavily with me because once I took the time to step back and do that work, I realized that the majority of what I was doing did not get me where I wanted to go. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't at certain levels or doing certain things or why I wasn't happy. But when I took a step back and realized, oh, well, this is what I do all day. This is what happens automatically. This is what's creating that challenge. I was able to take that accountability for myself and say, I'm the one causing that and I can change it. So absolutely, I 100% agree. And I always think about, you've heard me make movie references and how I see them differently now. The Matrix is one of those ones that I see differently now. Uh, the program was there. We're living inside, not inside a program. We're not going to go to that piece of it, but we have our own program. We're living inside our own program, and until we realize that and break away, we can't really make a change.
I need to go back and rewatch The Matrix. I must say that was not one of my favorite movies. I know I'm probably in the minority. People love The Matrix. My husband loves The Matrix. When it comes on, I zone out. But because we're having this conversation, let me go back and check it out again because I may think about it differently. But being on autopilot, that's really interesting thought. How much of my day do I just get up and I go and I do, and things happen and I'm not even thinking about it? And you probably have certain appointments or meetings or whatever, but outside of that, what are you doing that you just do and don't even think about it? It could be good, it could be bad, but when was the last time you took inventory of what you do on a daily basis? So, thinking about being programmed, well, where does that come from? Like, am I operating on my own program or am I operating on somebody else's program? I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Most of who we are and how we operate, the foundation was laid by your upbringing, your parents. How did they shape you? How did they form you? What beliefs did they instill in you? And what from that experience do you still carry from today? Also societal norms and pressures and things of that nature, things that we do because somebody else told me to do it or I'm expected to do these things. But how does that serve you in who you are today? And I really had to step back and take inventory of that and figure out who I was and what it meant to me. Um, the pressures from others are real. I've talked about getting to the point where I don't care about what people think. That took a while. It took a while. Still work on that to this day, but it definitely took some time to get there. The pressures from society and your family and the shaping from others. I'm pretty sure you had some of that in your journey as well.
Yeah, I think everybody has. I mean, if you think about it, our parents do the best they can in most cases to raise us as well as they can. And they try to prepare us for society. You have to go out, you go to school, you socialize, all those things. You're picking up all these pieces. And as you're starting to become, and grow, you're taking off cues because that's what you see and know. The trick becomes, what am I learning from that? And I'm making my own decision about whether that's right or wrong. So I think absolutely everybody is influenced from those pieces. I don't know that there's many that can get away from that, especially early on. But as you get older, you have to be able to make the conscious choice of, does that fit me anymore? So absolutely, I still have those scenarios now where I look back and say, I'm doing these things that I saw my dad do that drove me nuts. But that's what was instilled in me. That's how I saw, consciously or subconsciously. And I have to actively recognize and start to change that. There are still, I spent a ton of my life focused on other people and what they felt and thought, and trying to mold to that because I picked up the cues that the people that were that fell into that mold, that were popular, quote unquote popular, got more attention, more respect, all these different things. But that really wasn't what the case was. So 100%, I believe that's a very normal thing for a lot of people. And I think that's part of the challenge is, what are the big pieces that still suit you and serve you? And what are the pieces you need to start to take a different path?
Yeah, that piece about seeing your dad in you is so funny. Pieces of your family or your parents that bothered you, and then you find yourself doing the same thing. I definitely saw that as I had my child and he grew, and I found myself saying things, and I was like, that was my mom or that was my grandmother. Like, where'd that come from? And there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But as you grow and mature and you change and you become a different person, we have to continuously step back and reevaluate what we believe and how we're programmed do I actually believe that? Or is that my teacher talking? Are those my friends and their voices? Or is it really me? So, stepping back and taking inventory is something that we have to constantly do. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I'm moving to is doing that on an annual basis. So, we talk about putting together our goals, our vision boards, whatever the case may be in the, beginning of the year or however often you do it. I think that's a great time to take a step back and think about and literally write down what's important to me. What do I believe in? Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And think about, are your behaviors lining up with those things? Are there things that you need to stop, start, continue? That's something we did in corporate a lot, taking inventory of how things are going, the stop, start, continue. Why not do that with your life and realize what you're doing that is good and serving you, and what are some things that you can probably leave behind?
I think part to that as well is it may have served you at the beginning of the year or whatever it was, and it made sense. But as things started to materialize and shift, you have to be able to be flexible and make adjustments. So I 100% agree, continually doing that reassessment and saying, okay, am I still on the path I need to be on? Did this turn out like I thought it would be? Is it the value that I thought it would be? And if not, making the change. I think we called it keep, stop, start, but same concept. And it's so valuable because people will tend to stay on a path because they say, well, this is what we decided was important, but they don't reevaluate and say, is it still valuable? Is it still important? So they'll continue to put that energy and effort into it and not get the traction they want. So I think that's a great idea, Melanie. I'm glad you brought that one up. There's still value there. That's one of those ones that's
Yeah.
still very valuable.
There's some good tools that you can bring into your life. I think another thing that if you really want to do the work, you have to be open to getting feedback from others. So
Yep.
you can't do it in a vacuum. And the way that I see myself or I perceive myself versus how others see and perceive me could be different. It could be slightly different. It could be very different. And so another piece that I think would be really helpful is to get feedback from others. So those that are close to you, of course. I've aligned up my beliefs. I've lined up what it is I want to do. Ask your family, ask your friend, your spouse, your significant other, are my behaviors aligning with what I say my beliefs are? Am I operating in a way that supports what it is I'm trying to do and the goals that I'm trying to reach? Be open to receiving the feedback. And probably the hardest thing is try not to be defensive. You're asking people to give you feedback. So you have to receive the feedback. And it's all about growth. If we can't receive the feedback and address it and try to embrace what's being said, you may not believe it, you may not agree with it, it might be hard, but it's all about your growth. So incorporate feedback from others. I think that's another key component.
I, yeah, I would agree. I would add one caveat. Make sure you're considering who you're getting that feedback from.
Oh,
Because I know
definitely.
a lot of people that have surrounded themselves with others that are intimidated or whatever by their success, and they do things intentionally or unintentionally to break them down. And I've seen so many people broken down because of that. So ensure that you know and you have a quality network around you. Like I always say, your network is your net worth. So making sure you have positive people around you that want to see you succeed. And sometimes, as sad as it is to say this, sometimes your family doesn't want that. Because for some reason they feel less about themselves, or you're in an environment where they don't see that bigger picture. And it's just the unfortunate reality for some people, not for all. If your family is that supporting, loving, like you're talking about, Melanie, absolutely, that's who you should be confiding in. But sometimes it's the family you chose versus the family you were born into that is the right feedback loop for you. And I always say it is good to have at least one person that's going to give you the hard truth, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes hard to swallow, like you say. You don't want to believe it sometimes. I've got at least one of those in my network now, and he'll give me the hard truth. And I might not like it at first, but I'll take it back and I'll start to process it and be like, yep, he's right. I need to do this. I need to work on this. But let go of the ego, allow yourself to take that in, and then work on it.
Yeah. Take an inventory of your network. That's huge as well. So we talked about beliefs and who you are and all that good stuff, but you bring up a really, really good point. Who are you surrounding yourself with? If you are surrounding yourself with toxic relationships, to a certain degree, there's family. Sometimes there's not much you can do about that. You have, your family, and you want to work on those relationships. You want to make them better. But there are others that you really need to take a step back and think about, are they still serving me? Are those relationships still serving me? Like you said, do those people want to see you win, or is there maybe some jealousy there? You may not know what it is, but you know when something doesn't feel right.
Yep.
Don't pass on that feeling. You really need to step back and explore those feelings. As we grow and change in life, our surroundings change, and the people around us need to change as well in certain situations. And so, you may be at a point in your life where you have to walk away from some relationships, or maybe take inventory of how much time you give to that relationship. So that's a really, really great point. I love that your network is your net worth. That's huge. I love that.
Yeah, and they say that you're a reflection of the top 5 people that you spend most of your time with. And back to that, the kind of the programming and thought of it, you don't realize the influence those people have on you.
Yeah.
And just because you're taking in the information all the time, these are the people you're talking to, you're confiding in, you're listening to kind of how things are going with them. If they're drama filled and it's always talking about this person did this and this person did that, that's starting to feed that negative energy into you. And you've got to be careful about that. I've had plenty of people in my life, and for a lot of them, I started to try to help them and find a positive. And if they were continuously negative, I had to make that tough decision to step away and cut out of that circle. And it's not easy. I've had friends of, near a decade that I had to step away from and say, this, if you're not looking to elevate yourself like I'm trying to elevate myself, then it's not really on that same path anymore. And I'm not here to change you. That's not my job. If that's not an alignment, then it's time for me to kind of find a different path. So it's tough. And I think for a lot of people, there are, like I said, family members, and that's even tougher. But making that decision for yourself, it gives you the breathing room. I keep thinking this analogy. They say um, it's some type of fish or whatever it is, but when you put it into a bowl, it only grows as big as its environment. But if you put it into the ocean, it grows to substantially larger. So
Yeah.
you have to allow yourself that room to grow. But having those people that are not benefiting you or trying to help you grow are going to be your bowl, and they're going to kind of reduce your ability to grow.
That, and being around negative people and negative influences sometimes how we talk to ourselves. And you have to be really careful about the negative self-talk, because how you think is who you are. And if you are allowing negativity to seep into your brain, to seep into your subconscious, and you reiterate that, or you talk to yourself in a negative way, then that is going to manifest in what you do and how you behave. So it's really, really important that you, like you said, surround yourself with good people, with positive people. Allow yourself to grow. I love that fishbowl analogy. That's really cool. But the negative self talk can be your downfall. You have to put that in check. Sit back and think about how you talk to yourself, how you react when something happens, with maybe if you make a mistake or you forget to do something. Maybe you have a presentation and it doesn't go exactly the way you want it to go. There are a million different examples, but think about how you react to those situations. Do you beat yourself up? Do you continue to think about it and go down a rabbit hole about it and just swirl on it? Or you can acknowledge that it went wrong, or things didn't turn out exactly how you wanted them to. Take an opportunity to step back and think about, why didn't they? Maybe it was the fact that I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be, or whatever the case may be. Maybe I didn't have the tools I needed. Allow yourself to evaluate why you got the outcome that you did, and then make a plan to do it differently. in the future and support yourself. You know what? I made a mistake. Acknowledge that. Now I have a plan. Let me move on. Don't continue to swirl and talk to yourself in a way that you wouldn't want someone else to speak to you.
And that is so important. That self talk was one of those things that is another part that it was a challenge for me. And I didn't realize how negative I was to myself. And some people say, oh, I'm just joking, but your mind doesn't know the difference. So, what I've always heard is where your thoughts go, your energy flows. So, if you're putting all your thoughts into the negative, I didn't do this, I can't do this, or I'm not capable of this, then you're going to keep yourself in that box. It's going to continually hold you back. So I love that you brought that up because it is absolutely so important. There's people that just beat themselves up day in and day out. And there's a fine line that you have to walk between holding yourself accountable and beating yourself up. You need to hold yourself accountable. That's what gives you the power to make the change. But you can't beat yourself up. To your examples, okay, so I missed a deadline or I didn't do this as well as I like or whatever that may be, learn the lesson, learn what you're responsible for and say, I'm going to take action to fix that going forward. That will give yourself more self-love and more self-respect if you take the action and you solve it. And when you do that and you have your self-respect and self-love, that creates that new energy that'll attract more respect from the outside as well. Don't focus on the outside, focus on yourself, but you'll be amazed at how much that changes when you learn to respect and love yourself and you do what you say you're going to do. Hold yourself accountable, but don't beat yourself up.
Yeah. Holding yourself accountable. That's key. In holding yourself accountable, you really need to take a step back and think about, do I do that? Do I really do that? And I've had those discussions, those internal thoughts with myself. Do I really hold myself accountable? Yeah, I think I hold myself accountable. But then you also have to ask yourself, am I victim blaming? Am I blaming others and being the victim for what's happening? And so, in thinking about, yes, I hold myself accountable, I think, to a huge degree, I have done that. But throughout this journey, and definitely in this past year, I've had to take a step back and think about even things that happened in the past, in the distant past, that I felt like I did the work and I was good. I was still blaming others to a certain degree. And in that vein, the blaming came from that person did this, that person did that, so that this is why the situation turned out that way. That's fine. We can state the facts of what happened in the situation. But where I had to take accountability is, but I had a choice to be in the situation, to stay in the situation as long as I did, be it in relationships, a job, a business, whatever the case may be. You always have a choice. It may be a hard choice, it may be tough to make that choice, but you always have a choice. And not making a choice is a choice.
Yeah.
It may not be something that you intentionally did. You may just sit there and not make a choice because it's hard or you're afraid or whatever the case may be, but you are still making a choice to stay in that situation. And so, as you know, you can't change other people's behaviors. You can only control yourself. If you're in a situation that's not serving you, you have to make a decision about how you want to proceed. And if you decide to stay, then don't blame the other person for their behavior or how things are turning out because you decided to stay in that situation.
And it's not easy. There's so many different things that happen from those different scenarios. And the one bit of advice that helped me that seems harsh is just accept this fact. It's your fault. And what I mean by that is not the way somebody reacted, not what something happened to you, but your choices, as Melanie discovered, your choices around that scenario. And the reason that this is helpful is because you can now take the power back. When you're constantly blaming somebody else or an outside influence, you have no power over that. You only have power over yourself. So when you take accountability and say, this part was my fault. I now have the power and the control to go and make those changes. I can't even express how liberating it was when I finally accepted that fact that, look, just take accountability. Know that you had a role and you had a piece to it. Even when it's easier to blame somebody else, it feels easier to blame or a person or situation or whatever that is. You're actually creating more challenges for yourself because you now feel that your life is out of control. You don't have any ability to influence it. When you take that control, you take that accountability and start doing the work to make the changes, things open up. You then can start to set your boundaries, you set your standards, and anything or anyone that doesn't meet that, you leave that off to the side because you don't want to put yourself in this situation again. And you now have regained control. Those are some things that will make a substantial difference, at least did for me. I don't know about for you, Melanie.
Yeah, no, that you can only control yourself. And once you really center your thoughts and your decisions around yourself, obviously you have family and children and you have to take other people and other things into consideration, but at some point in your life you have to start putting yourself first and you have to start realizing that if I don't make the decisions to put myself on the right path or to make myself happy, no one else is going to do that for you. You can't rely on others to make you happy. And so, um, stepping away and looking at situations from the outside in and just take a step back and take inventory of things that have happened to you in your past or whatever is going on right now and be honest with yourself around whether or not you're blaming others or if you actually are taking accountability. Now there are caveats, and I want to make sure that we say this as well. You do have a choice and all those good things. That's true. There are certain situations where there may be extenuating circumstances. If you were a child and you went through abuse, or if you were in an abusive relationship, we totally understand those things. That there are circumstances that are different. And this is where we reiterate we are not therapists. We're just talking about our experiences, but that is where therapy really comes into play. And you really need to take the time to sit down on somebody's couch or get on somebody's Zoom call, a professional, and talk about situations where you've struggled in the past and how you can do better in the future to step away from that, blaming others for the situations that you find yourself in.
And we're by no means saying, look, this is easy. These are easy situations. Just walk away. That's not it. I would say, even in, like you mentioned, the relationship portion of it, one thing that I would do is anytime there was a major situation, when I was married, it was, what's my part in this? Even if it felt like it was 100% on her, I always wanted to step back and say, what's my part in this? Because I wanted to learn and grow and be better and be a better husband, be a better partner. There's always those parts. To your last points, Melanie, yeah, that sometimes it's people are not comfortable with therapists. There is a value to it. I have had good therapists before. Where I found a lot of it was, my own internal self work. But to me, it's difficult to do it all on your own. So I agree. If you have a good therapist, that's very, very helpful. Understand that the depths, it's only as effective as you're willing to put into it too. So from my perspective, there were pieces that worked, that did help me for sure. There are then pieces that I needed to work through on my own. I needed to learn how to listen to myself. I needed to learn how to meditate. I needed to learn different things to that nature that helped me just really dig in because I didn't know what it was. And I, for whatever reason, some of the therapists I worked with weren't able to uncover it either. So I had to learn how to listen to myself and see those pieces to start to dig in and uncover some of those underlying challenges. This I align it to, like, some of the Western medicine. Like, a lot of times we treat the symptoms instead of the root cause. So for me, I wanted to understand the root cause, because if you just fix the symptoms, you're going to have another symptom pop up and you have the underlying issue still remaining. So from my perspective, I really wanted to dig in and figure out what's driving me. And to your point, a really good therapist can help you get there. For me, I needed to do some of that work myself.
I think it's a combination of both for me, but a greater point is different for everyone.
100%.
So you have to figure out what works best for you. At the end of the day, you have to dive in and do the inventory. Figure out, who am I? What's my programming? What does that look like? Where is it coming from? Does it still serve me? Take inventory of your friends and your surroundings, like we said. And then the being accountable, all of those things, no one can do that for you. Even working with the therapist, they can't do that for you. They can give
No.
you tools to help uncover things. But at the end of the day, this is a solo journey that you're on, and you can get help and input from others, but you have to step up and just take the step, get on the path. It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but once you have these epiphanies, oh my God, it's so worth it. It's so worth it to realize, okay, wait a minute, that's not who I am. That's not serving me. One of the examples that's funny between us is, I'll say, allow yourself grace to do what's organic for you. So, from a societal perspective, the term early bird gets the worm is huge. And a lot of people subscribe to that, and it works for them. Get up in the early in the morning. You're the early bird. You're up in the morning. You, before I've even turned over, you've done your workout and you're ready to go. I kept trying to force myself to do that, but that's not really organic for me. And so I was fighting a battle against myself. And one day it just was an epiphany of, well, why do I have to get up at 7 in the morning? Why can't I get up at 8:30? Why can't I get up at 9? I'm more of a night owl. So getting up at 7 or 6 or 5 is harder for me because I probably didn't go to bed until 1, maybe 2:30. But guess what? I was being productive during those times. So give yourself grace to do what's organic to you and stop fighting against yourself to do what society says or somebody else tells you you need to do.
And that's a great example because I'm the 5:36 in the morning person. The thought of being up at 1 or 2 in the morning just makes me sick to my stomach. I'm like, that's just terrible. Why do I want to be up that late? But it's the reality that we all have the same 24 hours. You choose where you place your efforts and your time. You don't have to follow. There is no like one way to be successful. And I'm hoping everybody picks that up as we go through this. Is while Melanie and I have a lot of similarities in our journeys, we also have some very distinct differences. And you can get there through many different paths, but it's about identifying what path works for you. I do like being up in the morning. My dogs won't let me sleep in past 6 because they're hungry. But I'm also in bed by 11 o'clock. And I just prefer that. And that means I do get up, I am at the gym. But that doesn't mean that Melanie, as an example, is further behind than me because while I'm sleeping, she's working.
Yep.
And I have plenty of friends that I know, some very successful people that they wake up at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, you're crazy. But they're working until 3 or 4 in the morning. And that's what works for them. So finding what works for you is important.
Absolutely. And see, that's why I'm a cat person, because I can't have dogs jumping on me and waking me up early in the morning. My cat's right next to me. She's sleeping all day. We're good. So, another difference. Do what works for you. So, the homework for today's episode would be self aware. You have to start taking the inventory, figuring out who you are, what works for you, who you're surrounding yourself with. All those things will help you on your journey of finding your purpose. And this is one of the key components that we wanted to bring to you today. So work on being self aware, y'all.
And if you want to take that to an extreme and you're trying to figure out how can I accomplish more or what are my programs, get some pen and paper out. Time block your
Mm-hmm.
day. Mark down what are you actually doing. Oh, I spent 3 hours on Netflix, or I, didn't actually get up. I laid in bed for 3 hours, or whatever that is. I don't know why I keep choosing 3 hours, but whatever that is, start to time block your day. And what you start to notice is, okay, I feel really, really busy, but I do have some places I can be more efficient, or I'm doing things that I don't need to do. So I know that feels uncomfortable, and it's like, okay, that's more work. I don't want to do that. But if you want to get somewhere, you got to put in the work. So taking that time to time block those and really look at what you're doing and doing that keep, stop, start exercise, like we talked about, like what's really important, what do I really need to do? is valuable. Now, I am not saying take all your time away from things that help you decompress and things that you enjoy. You need to have time in there for that. Actually, what I've learned a lot is you're most effective when you can cram 4 hours, a 4 hour block of hard work, power through 4 hours, you'll be the most efficient and effective versus trying to work for 18, 20 hours a day because your mind is more fresh, you're able to accomplish more. But it takes time to kind of get to that mode. But doing that inventory allows you to actually start to visualize the reality versus your perceived reality, which I think is a lot more helpful.
Yeah. Respect your body, respect your breaks that you need. If you take away, I'm like deep into Suits. I know I'm late. That show went off a long time
That's a
ago.
good
I'm on
show.
like season 3. But sometimes in the middle of what I'm doing, I stop and just go watch an episode just to give my brain a break. And then when I come back, I feel like I'm more creative because I took a step back and just, just step away from work sometimes. If you can. It depends on what your situation is. If you have meetings all day, obviously you can't do that. But I love that idea. Take inventory of what you're doing in your day and figure out what's working and what's not working. So, all different ideas that we have on ways to help you figure out who you are, figure out if you're being accountable, and find your purpose. So, in our next episode coming up, we're going to continue to talk about purpose. We're going to talk about the difference between purpose and passion. That's a great discussion that we had. Is there a difference? Yes. So we'll talk about that. And then aligning your passion with your skills, your talents, your gifts. This will help you to start living in your purpose. So we're going to talk about those things and kind of bring this all together to help you. And then we had a question in the comments, and I think this is excellent. So definitely tune in for our next episode. But at Welby Broadus Jr. 1173 said, "Great show. I'll be listening for this is what I need to get out of my current situation and follow my true passion. God has shown me what it is, but I'm afraid to pursue it full time. How do I just go ahead and do it?" Tune in for this continued talk on purpose so we can give you some more tips on how to do just that. We thank you guys for tuning in yet again, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.